Inclusion starts with I. I choose to include you. Inclusion is a choice. If you don't choose inclusion, you are choosing exclusion and segregation. It's a cold winter night in Minnesota, and parents are sitting at a meeting in an elementary school, listening to a presentation on a new school that's going to be built in town. As the slide transitions, they see the blueprint of the first floor on the screen. The eyes of one parent are drawn to the words near a door on the blueprint that say special education entrance. Shock and disbelief overwhelm them, as they cannot believe what they are seeing. How is this possible 38 years after the law was passed for children with disabilities to attend school? How is this possible 22 years after the Americans with Disability Act was passed? The year was 2013, and I was that parent sitting there in shock and disbelief. I was in shock and disbelief because my daughter, who was diagnosed with epilepsy at 3 months old and who uses a wheelchair to get around, would be attending that school when it opened. She does not use a separate door to go into Walmart, so why is there a separate door at the school? I had to, as a parent, as a dad, I had to email back and forth with the principal to allow her to enter the regular door with her peers. According to the Centers for Disease Control, 27 adults in the United States have a disability. According to another study published in 2013, if you live to be the age 76, 46% of you will have what's considered a disability and will need assistance with daily living tasks, such as feeding yourself and getting dressed. If you're fortunate enough to live till you're 90, that percentage jumps to 77%. Imagine a world where everyone feels like they belong, no matter their differences. That's the world I want to help create. Together we can unlock a more inclusive future for people with disabilities. When I was thinking about what I would talk about tonight, I wanted something that would help my daughter, not only help my daughter, but all those with disabilities. You see, I'm getting older. I'm going to be 47 years old. My daughter needs 24/7 care. She needs somebody there all the time to take care of her. So I'm getting older. Last October, I hurt my back, and I wasn't able to, lift her and transfer her out of her wheelchair. So I need people like you to be there, to include her, to be able to care for her as I'm getting older. And if she does live longer than I do, I will need people to be there for her to help assist in those cares. Inclusion starts with I choose to include you. The way I feel that can be done is with empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. It's about putting yourself in someone else's shoes and seeing the world from their perspective. Empathy allows us to connect with others on a deeper level, to understand their joys and their struggles, and to offer them compassion. When it comes to people with disabilities, empathy is especially important. It helps us understand the challenges they face, the barriers they encounter, and the discrimination they may experience. Empathy is the foundation of inclusion. It's essential if we want to create a more inclusive society for everyone. Inclusion starts with I choose to include you. Empathy plays a crucial role in building inclusive communities. When we empathize with others, we are more likely to act in ways that promote inclusion and acceptance. We are more likely to listen to their perspectives, to understand their needs, and to work together to create a more accessible and inclusive environment. For people with disabilities, empathy is the key to breaking down barriers and creating a more inclusive society. When we empathize with their experiences, we are better able to advocate for their rights, support their needs, and create spaces where they feel welcomed and valued. Inclusive communities are built on empathy, and it's up to each of us to cultivate this empathy in ourselves and others. Inclusion starts with I choose to include you. Cultivating and empathy starts with listening and education. We need to listen to people with disabilities and learn from their experiences. We need to hear their stories, their struggles, and their triumphs. By listening, we can gain a deeper understanding of their lives and the barriers they face. Another important aspect of cultivating empathy is education. We need to educate ourselves about different disabilities, their causes, and their impact on people's lives. We need to learn about the challenges that people with disabilities face, from physical barriers to social stigma, and how these challenges can affect their daily lives. By educating ourselves, we can develop a greater understanding of empathy and for others. Together, listening and education can help us cultivate a more empathetic and inclusive society. Inclusion starts with I. I choose to include you. Empathy is not just about understanding, it's also about taking action. When we see someone struggling, whether it's with a physical task or a social barrier, we can offer our help and support. We can advocate for inclusive policies in our communities, workplaces, and schools. We can speak out against discrimination and prejudice. By taking action, we can make a real difference in someone's life and help create a more inclusive world. Empathy and action go hand in hand, and it's up to each of us to take that first step towards a more inclusive future. Inclusion starts with I. I choose to include you. We all have a role to play in inclusion. As family members and friends, we can support our loved ones with disabilities, listen to their needs, and advocate for their rights. Are we trying to understand their needs or just doing what's convenient for us? If there's a family function, such as a birthday party or a wedding, are we making sure that those locations are accessible to people with wheelchairs? Are we making spaces where they feel welcomed and respected as the amazing person they are? As neighbors and citizens, we can work to make our communities more accessible and inclusive for everyone. Are we paying attention to whether they're set up in ways that include everybody? Are there curb cuts on all the sidewalks? Is there handicap accessible spaces in the parking lots? Are the new housing developments that are being put up, do they include sidewalks for everybody, so everybody with mobility needs can get around safely? Are we having dialogues about improving access and accommodations? Are we putting pressure on leaders to prioritize inclusion of people with disabilities? As consumers and employees, we can support businesses and organizations that promote diversity and inclusion. The companies and brands we support with our money and jobs, do they share the same values on accessibility and inclusion that we do? If they don't, why are we spending money at those businesses? Each of us has the power to make a difference in our own way, and it's important that we take personal responsibility for a more inclusive society. Inclusion starts with I. I choose to include you. Making huge changes is important, but powerful inclusion also happens through simple, compassionate, daily actions too. Sometimes it's the small acts that have the biggest impact. A smile, a kind word, a helping hand can make a difference. When I asked my friend Nick, who has cerebral palsy, what people can do to include him, he said this to me: if I'm at a restaurant with another person, ask me what I want to drink and eat. He said too often, if he goes to a restaurant with somebody else, they look straight past him at the person that's with him and ask them what he wants to eat. I've also noticed this taking my daughter to doctor appointments. When you go to a doctor appointment, they usually ask you what your name is and your birthday. I haven't taken a percentage, but it's probably way over half of the time they'll look at me or her mom and ask us what her name and birthday is. So then I redirect them and say, tell them what your name and birthday is. These small acts of kindness can help break down barriers, build connections, and create a more inclusive and compassionate society. It's important to remember that we all have the power to make a difference, no matter how small our actions may seem. Together, these small acts can add up to create a more inclusive world for everyone. Inclusion starts with I. I choose to include you. Honestly ask yourself, how much empathy do you have towards people with disabilities? Where can you open your mind more? Call out disability discrimination whenever you encounter it, even if it's casual or accidental. What can I do today to make the world more inclusive? Demand more inclusion from communities, employers, businesses, anyone whose policies impact people with disabilities. Let's work together to unlock inclusion for people with disabilities. Let's cultivate empathy, take action, and create a world where everyone feels like they belong. Together we can make a difference. Let's make inclusion a reality for everyone. Inclusion starts with I. I choose to include you in our family. Inclusion starts with I. I choose to include you as my friend. Inclusion starts with I. I choose to include you in our neighborhood. Inclusion starts with I. I choose to include you in our community. Inclusion starts with I. I choose to include you in our society. Let's say it one time together. Inclusion starts with I. I choose to include you. Thank you.